Uzumaki, the shape of a spiral that leaves us in a trance as we stare into its infinite depths. Within its spirals grows chaos, yet at the same time, order exists in the twisting lines. The very structure of the spiral is alluring as we follow its patterns inwards, yet the twirls of the shape leave also an unnerving sensation. In an effort to explore the mysticism of the spiral, Junji Ito set out and created one of the most renowned horror mangas of all time, giving it the title Uzumaki. And this video will blend visuals from both anime and manga to deliver a more refined, fleshed out version of his story, that which the anime failed to deliver on. As we dive deeper into the mystery of the spiral which has cursed the town of Kurozucho, keep this in mind. Unlike the stories I've narrated in the past, Uzumaki is far more grotesque, far more horrific. Its panels and carefully crafted story leave you unsettled and questioning what horrors man is capable of when a society begins to collapse. This is not a story for those that fear the infinity of the horrors lurking in our minds. This is the story of Uzumaki. The town of Kurozucho has begun to change, not in a way that raises alarm among the residents. These changes are slight. The waters have begun to contort in odd patterns. The grass curls back upon itself. The wind twirls in small twisters. To us, these signs may be cause for alarm, but for the residents, it's as if some unexplained presence is contorting their soul, ensuring them that there is no need for panic, that they should welcome these spirals appearing within their lives. But Shuichi Saito fights the alluring nature of the spiral after seeing it overtake his father's sanity. Saito-san hoards objects with a spiral pattern within his home. He stops going to work so that he can study the spiral. He becomes aggressive with his own wife and son if they interfere with his life of spirals. Shuichi deduces that a curse is setting upon their town, the land itself acting as if a warning of the dark times to come. He approaches his girlfriend, Kirei Goshima, with the idea of running from the Uzumaki curse, escaping town before it's too late and they become ensnared in its game. But Kirei doesn't take his concerns seriously. She dismisses her boyfriend's worries as if they're delusions, but as someone who commutes out of town for school, he senses each time on his return the worsening nature of this town. It isn't until a few days since the Uzumaki has set eyes on the town that Kirei has her first brush with the spirals during a delivery to Shuichi's father. Even in light of what she witnessed, Kirei remains unchanged in her decision to stay in this town. It's odd how quickly she dismisses such a grotesque sign of insanity. The coiling of Saito's tongue is not something to brush under the rug, and is already the second bodily spiral he had created, the first being with his eyes, rattling around as he spoke of the divine nature of the Uzumaki. Yet outstretching his tongue into a spiral, removing the limits of what a human body is capable of, isn't what kills him. It's his descent into a bathtub, where he coils himself around its walls, snapping his bones and tendons to create an art piece of human flesh. That's what killed him. They mourn Saito's death at the town crematorium, watching as the flesh of his body mixes with the smoke in the air. Shuichi's mother sheds tears as her husband's remains release into the atmosphere, which is when the spiral latches on to its next victim. Spiraling into the sky, contorting into a human face, Saito's ashes create an ominous cloud that spells the end of times. Shuichi's mother loses all composure, screaming to her husband to leave this earth, falling to the ground in fear and panic. In her mind, the image of her husband coiled within the wooden tub is forever carved, and the mere sight of a spiral, whether on the back of a hair bun or the tip of a finger, causes her to remember Saito. She becomes crazed, believing that her husband will enter the spirals of her body. She can hear him call out to her, pleading for her to join him within the spiral, and so she shaves her hair, cuts off her fingertips and footprints. She removes every spiral off the human body, that is, except for one. Within our ear is the most spiral structure of the human body, the cochleya. Its purpose is hearing and helping us maintain a sense of balance. Ironic that a structured spiral would be the very thing preventing us from experiencing vertigo, the uncontrolled spinning of perception. Thankfully, Mother Saito does not know of its existence. That is, until one night. The centipede flies across the floor, finally curling up in the very shape she fears. It calls out to her with the face of her husband, telling her of the still remaining spirals within her body, and its desire to crawl into her ears and sleep deep within. This sends her into a panic. She asks the doctor the next day about the spirals within her ears. He assures her there is no such thing, but she's unbelieving. She tears around his office, questioning why he removed the poster of human anatomy, ripping open his research books, looking for a sign of the pattern within her ear. She presses on about the spirals, but the doctor knows better than to admit to this fearful woman the truth. Shuichi, the nurse, and the doctor are able to calm her down slightly, giving her a drug that should help her relax, but the curse of the spiral won't allow her to rest. Her IV begins to swirl into a funnel. Within the funnel, her husband's face once again appears, insisting of the spiral within her ear, repeating these words until she rips the IV from her arm and knocks over the podium. In hysteria, she scrambles to find a sharp object, ripping through drawers till she finds a pair of scissors. She thinks of the spirals hiding within and plunges the weapon into her ear. The severe internal bleeding was enough to kill the woman, though not before leaving her alive to be lost in the terrible sensation of vertigo, haunted by the spiral, being enveloped in it, even in her final moments. As her body's flesh enters the sky, once more the smoke creates a twisted pattern within the atmosphere, as if a warning of the curse's grasp on Kurozo and the end of times. When Kirei began going to high school, she had made friends with a girl named Azami. Azami was a very beautiful girl, oftentimes the center of attention around boys, but she had no particular interest in them. She gave anyone who tried to seduce her the cold shoulder, occasionally leading them on and occasionally leaving them to their own devices. That is until she met Shuichi. Despite knowing that Kirei is already dating him, she had an unexplained infatuation with the boy. It's as if the inability to obtain him excited her more. Seeing no harm in at least introducing Azami to Shuichi, she takes her to his house, only for Shuichi to recoil in fear. The girl has a strange aura coming off her, as if ensnared within a spiral. It seems that the curse had already chosen its next victim. Shuichi demands she leaves and the girls walk home. Kirei apologizes for Shuichi's behavior, but Azami seems to be understanding. He had, after all, just lost his parents. The pair part ways and go to their separate homes. Only Azami takes a small detour. She lets herself in and creeps closer to Shuichi. She professes her deep affection for him. He's the only boy that wasn't head over heels for her at the get-go. She shows him her forehead where a crescent scar she had since she was little is located, only it no longer holds that shape. It's become a spiral. The very world pattern that has encapsulated this village. Shuichi warns her to get out of this town and transfer schools from Kurozo to the town her family home sits in, but she doesn't listen. Instead, she convinces her parents to let her rent an apartment just down the road from Shuichi's. Night after night, she bangs on his door, begging him to see her, to fall in love with her, but he hides in terror of the girl with a spiral on her forehead. Several days go by. Kirei had tried to get Azami to stop bothering Shuichi, but she's far past reason. The spiral has only gained greater area on her forehead. However, her obsession doesn't reach its heights until one spring night. Having convinced a boy who was obsessed with her to call Shuichi to the neighborhood park to meet him, she planned to intercept him and finally get to speak to him face to face once more. Only Kirei, who was alerted by Shuichi of this strange meeting, is the first one Azami bumps into. Her obsession for Shuichi has consumed the very looks she relies on. The spiral takes up nearly all of the girl's face. Her right eye, which is barely held in place, releases from its seat and spins into the void. This horrific monster in front of Kirei leaves her unable to move as Azami presses forward to the park. She appears before the two boys, dismissing the boy Okada, telling him she's uninterested in keeping her promise to take him on a date. In anger, he grabs the hat from her head, revealing that the spiral has only grown bigger. Azami no longer has eyes to see with. She cackles as the boys stand in shock. Okada is strangely allured by the void and reaches towards it. He's sucked into the spiral, screaming as his body is crushed in small space. Kirei and Shuichi can only watch on in horror as the void consumes the remnants of Okada, followed by what remains of Azami, until not even a trace of their existence is left behind. Kirei's family have been in the pottery business for ages, and even in the strange times they've been experiencing, work must go on. But something strange has begun to morph her father's ceramics. Ever since Saito's death, spirals of smoke appear in the sky each time someone is cremated, and these spirals deposit into the dragonfly pond just outside their home. Since this began, Yasuo's pottery has taken on a life of its own. Spirals inhabit every inch of his creations, faces that scream out in agony cake his designs, faces that hold a strong resemblance to the recently dead Kurozo. Clay comes from the earth and the erosion of rocks near bodies of water like Dragonfly Pond, Yasuo's hotspot for obtaining the tools for his creations. Lately, he's become more obsessed with his work, refusing to sleep, staring into the kiln for hours on end, becoming erratic if someone tries to separate him from the spiral of works. The curse strikes again. Yasuo's obsession turns horrific. Kide checks on her father in the Kiln cottage, only to hear the screams of Shuichi's parents from the fires. It would seem their souls had inhabited the earth bed of Dragonfly Pond, and are within the clay that Yasuo currently burns. After staring into the hellfire of the kiln, glimpsing the souls wiggling around in futility, the voices don't leave her ears, even after her father kicks her out of the kiln room. She tries to call Shuichi to calm down, but the boy hears the voices of his parents screaming his name in desperation to be saved. He rushes over to their home, demanding to see Mr. Goshima's kiln. Entering the room, he can hear his parents' voices clearly. He grabs a brick and chucks it into the kiln, breaking down its walls. The souls rush free from their entrapment, scattering around the area, taking flight into the sky, others grounded by their ceramic bodies. The cottage goes up in flames, the Goshima family watching as it burns. By morning, the fires are extinguished. Mrs. Goshima is just glad that they're all safe and their home remains. Yasuo, however, is only fixated on the works of art that escaped the kiln and had solidified in the fires of the cottage. He studies their beauty and faces of sorrow. The obsession of the spiral has already inhabited his entire being. Two lovers, driven apart by families who hate one another. Deviating from Romeo and Juliet, these two families live on separate sides of a wall that divides a row house originally constructed in the Edo period of Japan. These houses differ from Japan's Machiya townhomes most of you are likely familiar of by being parallel to the road, broken up into different apartments, contrary to the Machiya's perpendicular design that usually houses one family. Despite the aggression and hostility between the two households, Yoriko and Kazunori stay true to their love even in the pits of abuse. Kide confides in Shuichi about what she's seen the couple go through. He tells her these townhouses have existed here for centuries, given they go against the flow of the town, positioned in odd locations. It's not outlandish to believe that they are part of the spiral curse itself, these families' irrational aggression suddenly making sense. Shuichi once again begs Kirei to run away with him and escape this cursed town before it's too late, but this only upsets her, believing that he's ignoring those he's deemed a lost cause. But as he's proved time and time again, there's no saving someone who the spiral has already set its sights on. She storms out in frustration to help the couple herself, aiding their desire to run from this town and their abusive homes and elope. Only the families will do everything to prevent their love. As they make an escape across the beach, they are once more caught by their fathers. Kazunori is knocked to the ground by Yoriko's brother. The fear sets in that they'll be separated yet again, but Kazunori refuses to say goodbye to his love. The boy contorts his body, twisting his torso as if it's made of stretchable rubber. He calls to his beloved to do the same as she too stretches beyond the limits of the human body. The lovers reach out to each other, grasping one another's hands. They twist together, forming a bond stronger than steel cable. Yuriko's father can do nothing to break the weaving of their bodies. The two lay there on the beach, inseparable. They slither towards the waters, telling their families they can no longer keep them apart. The lovers disappear into the sea. The battle for attention is a reality many are faced with. We all crave to be seen by others, and some become so starved for a glance their way, they'll do something as stupid as a handstand on the side of the roof. As this boy's skull lays splintered upon the pavement, all eyes fall upon him. Kirei finds his actions absurd, but her classmate Sakino is rather understanding of the kid's intentions. Lately, her obsession with attention has grown. She has this deep-rooted desire to demand the spotlight, to mesmerize an audience, which follows in hand with the basis of a spiral. The pattern twists into a coil, mesmerizing the human eye. We instinctively look to the middle in search of where its path leads. Yet it never ends. We're left in a trance, looking for an end we'll never find. That's the beauty in its chaos. The spiral decides to toy with this girl. It inhabits Kirei's hair, growing it in length and curling at the ends. Eyes fall to her at school, eyes she does not want, but eyes another is desperate for. Kirei tries to have it cut, but the hair takes on a life of its own, attempting to strangle the hairdresser, suffocating Kirei when the idea of taking her to a hospital comes up. The hair only releases her when she stops resisting its existence. She lets it be, but the hair continues to become more erratic. more attention-seeking. It curls up to the heavens in strange patterns, entrancing those that look into its spirals. Kide has lost control of her life to the sentient hair. It guided her to anywhere with crowds so that it can gain more attention. She no longer has the strength to struggle against it, for as it grows in length, she becomes weaker and weaker. All she can do is lament that it was her refusal to leave with Shuichi that led to this turn of events. But this was only the beginning. Jealousy had fueled a girl to rival Kide's hair. Sakino had been consumed by the spiral's will, challenging Kide to a battle of attention. Her hair accepts this bout, and over the next few days, a competition for an audience's attention ensues, slowly sucking the life out of both their bodies. Sakino begins to get frustrated and lashes her hair out towards Kide's throat, attempting to kill her. Shuichi enters the scene and cuts the girl's hair that has attacked his girlfriend. He rushes to Kide with his scissors and begins to cut her hair. It fights him, wrapping Shuichi in a cocoon. As Kide falls to the pavement, the husk of Sakino trots off in victory, as Shuichi frees himself and Kide from the cursed hair. Sakino's victory lap is short-lived. The life begins quickly leaving her body, her hair wrapping itself around an electric pole, climbing to great heights to display itself, before dying along with its host. Love has a wide range of effects on people. In some cases, it makes you annoying and downright creepy. The local boy Mitsuru has obtained the title of Jack in the Box for his consistent prank of jumping out at people to scare him. It's aggravating, and to add to it, he uses this prank as a way to constantly profess his love for Kide. After several days of the same trick with no positive response, Mitsuru takes a different approach to professing love. He mimics a scene he saw on TV of a man jumping in front of a car to force it to stop as a way to show how serious he is. Only the car doesn't stop. The Mitsuru becomes coiled around its tire. The whole ordeal leaves Kide extremely traumatized and with survival guilt. After his funeral, she opens the box he had handed to her before he was crushed by the tire. From within the box, a clown springs out. The Jack in the Box had given her a Jack in a Box. After the moment of initial surprise, Kide collects herself, calling her boyfriend to ease these feelings of grief and nerves, when the Jack suddenly whispers something to her, telling her Mitsuru's death is her fault, and he will return to her in time. Panic sets in. Shuichi believes they should dig up his corpse and confirm his death. He's under the suspicion the spiral is at work again, which he would be right yet again. As they dig up the grave, a small opening appears at the head of the casket. The pair stands there looking at the hole. The must of a decaying corpse protrudes from it. Shuichi begins to pull the nails from the coffin when suddenly the face of Mitsuru appears in the hole. They recoil back as Mitsuru's body clambers around in the box until the top explodes from its placement. The corpse stands there idle for a moment, saliva pooling from its gaping mouth. Shuichi tells Kide to run as the corpse takes flight far over their heads. As they take off, the corpse springs after them, its guts slipping from the needlework done to keep the boy together. On his third bounce, his right leg rips from the rest of his body, its form too decayed to absorb the jump impact. Its second leg falls as he hits the ground once more, but the Jack in the Box continues its pursuit, a coiled spring appearing from its torso. It lunges onto Kide's back before falling completely apart. The spring of an automobile lies on the ground, separated from the other remains. The Jack in the Box had completed his final prank, one that was, like always, in poor taste. We all know someone that moves at the pace of a snail, always late, always slow to do, say, or understand anything. It's as if they move in a different time. Katayama is exactly that. His idle nature has made him a target for bullying at Kurozo High School. Sumuna takes out his frustrations on the kid, stripping him naked in the locker room and dragging him out into the hall. He points and laughs at Katayama, but others look on in horror. On the boy's back is the mark of a spiral. Late, yet again, Katayama shows up to class, though today something is different. His back has grown in size as if the spiral is rising from it. Its encasement looks hard, like the shell of a snail, which only grew bigger each passing day, until one morning, in the heavy rain, Katayama's body was no longer human. He had taken the shape of the very thing he reminded others of. The snail began strictly residing at the school. Given his form, his parents no longer recognized him and refused to believe this thing was their son. The school decided to take him in, constructing a cage for the boy to reside in. Sumuna would still toy with Katayama, even in this form, despite Kide's pleas for him not to do so. until ultimately karma got the best of them. Sumuna began to suffer similar symptoms to Katayama, becoming incredibly hot and dry when the clouds didn't coat the sky, and no rain could rehydrate his skin. He moved slower and was unable to keep up with others, ultimately going missing until reappearing on a rainy day outside the classroom window. The school snail pen now had 2 snails. Ironically, despite abusing Katayama, Sumuna now got along just fine with him, the two going so far as to mate. Several weeks go by, enough for snail maternity to run its course, and the pair of snails go missing. Yokata Sensei looks for them with Kire, following a trail of slime leading into the forest. They stumble upon the buried eggs of the 2 snails. Yokota, disgusted by the nature of the snail humans, crushes the eggs. These ungodly creatures cannot be allowed to populate the earth. It's sickening to allow more to be born. They continue their hunt for the boys, but are unable to find any trace of them. They're forced to give up. The next day, Yokota Sensei is absent from class. They can only assume the worst has come to happen. These suspicions confirmed when the door slides open a few days later, and he slithers into the classroom. Kurozu's town lighthouse has been dormant for years, abandoned in an era where ships no longer visit these shorelines. Yet strangely enough, the light has begun its service once again. Every night, at dusk, people of the town gather to watch the structure cake the village in a harsh white light as it turns around and around. Other residents become upset at the light's invasion of their windows and begin to complain about the tower's strange revitalization. 5 representatives set out to investigate what could be activating the light in the tower, but strangely enough, the group never returns to report their findings, and the light continues its duties night after night. At dusk, the tower becomes more of a problem when people begin to act erratic, walking in circles, unable to move in a straight line. Fishing boats suffer the same problem, one crashing upon the shoreline as if directionally challenged. A few young boys, including Kirei's brother Mitsuo, intend to explore the lighthouse's mysteries. Ignoring Kirei's insistence, they go nowhere near it. She follows the group up the steps, quickly realizing that this is yet another game the spiral has set for prey. The steps become endless as she climbs higher. The smell of burnt food tickles her nose. The soft glow of spirals becomes the only visible light source in this dark staircase. A few more steps reveal the source of the burning smell. Bodies of flesh, mangled and charred, lie on the stairs, hands outstretched as if clawing for an escape. 3 are counted. Climbing the stairs a little more, next to 2 of Mitsuo's friends is another pair of corpses. The 5 men that had investigated this lighthouse had been burned alive, but by what we have yet to find out. She continues to the top to find her brother, and along with him, the source of the flames. A strange spiral coats the light, hard as rock, yet melted like wax. It's as if the lens had melted along with the rest of the room, which is when the horrors of what charred the bodies clicks. She ushers the boys downstairs as the sun begins to set. Whether they have the time to flee or not doesn't cross their minds. They can only hope they have enough to descend the stairs. The light kicks on as the sun falls under the horizon line, its flames rushing after the fleeing humans. Mitsuo's friend slips on the concrete steps, falling behind the other 2. Kirei reaches her hand out for him to grasp, but the fires draw near. The boy is encased in flames, screaming in agony as the siblings are thrown down the steps by the sheer force behind the blaze. They wake up at the bottom of the tower, severely burned and badly injured. The following day, 6 bodies are discovered within the lighthouse, one belonging to the child she had failed to save. With no idea how to stop the tower's will, the lighthouse continues its service. Its beams cake the village in harsh white light every night at dusk. Summer has fallen upon the town of Kurozu. The season of mosquitoes is in full swing. This year the insects are greater in number, sticking in close clusters, creating a tornado pattern. Those that drifted from the pack would move in slow spirals, entrancing those that look at them too long. Kirei watches the insect packs gather from her hospital window, still recovering from the burns the lighthouse had gifted her. On a walk for some fresh air, she discovers a corpse laying in the bushes, coated in mosquito bites head to toe. Compared to what she's experienced the past few months, this was all too calm of a finding, though it is only the beginning. The mosquitoes begin targeting pregnant victims, the hospital maternity ward quickly reaching capacity due to this phenomena. The following days, several patients appear murdered in their beds, blood drained from their body, their corpses covered with holes that seem to be exit points. With no signs of the culprits, the staff is only left to wonder what could have caused these deaths. but Shuichi knows better. Visiting Kide, he pleads for her to leave the hospital, noting that something strange is occurring here. The cluster of mosquitoes only one of many signs. He tells her that the only mosquitoes that suck the blood from humans are females, feasting on our nutrients for their kin while pregnant. The fog begins to clear and the mystery murders. Yet Kide does not listen to her boyfriend and continues to stay at the hospital. As night falls, she hears the buzzing of a swarm coming from the hallway, growing louder with each passing moment. She steps out to locate the noise, seeing figures slowly approaching her door. As they grow closer, it's clear that they are the maternity patients recently bitten by mosquitoes. In each of their hands, small drills whose purpose would soon be made clear. They disperse into various hospital rooms. Kide peeks into one, only to find a woman mounted on a sleeping patient, twisting her drill into his carotid artery. Blood begins to spew from the hole as the woman latches her mouth over the wound, sucking the blood from his body. Kide instinctively makes a noise seeing this horror, alerting the mosquito woman to her presence. She cannot leave this girl alive, seeing that she knows of their little secret. Kide attempts to flee, but her still healing leg is unable to keep pace. She falls to the ground, moments from becoming the mosquito's next meal, when a man appears from his room, hearing the screams. The woman changes targets, as the entire maternity swarm follows the man into his room, hypnotizes him, and exercises every last drop of life from his body. A nurse stumbles into the chaos, becoming their next victim. Kide crawls back to her room, hoping to escape the swarm's gaze, but their eyes fall upon her once more. She forces her door shut, the woman pulling against her. Through the small crack of the entry, one mutters of drilling through Kide's cheek into her eye and sucking out its essence. She's left in panic as her cousin, who is within her room, hospitalized as a maternity patient, bit by mosquitoes, approaches behind her, craving the same nutrients those outside desire. Kide lets go of the door, backpedaling away from her cousin and swarm of women. She reaches for Shuichi's bug spray, letting it rip into the room. The women shriek in terror of the can's contents, running back to their ward, leaving Kide with trauma and a complicated story. No one believes her tale of the mosquito ladies. All remnants of the murders that would lead back to them have been removed. Their gowns clean, faces without a speck of blood. Nothing can be said to convince the police nor hospital staff that these corpses were run dry by those that would soon bring life into this world. But that's the reality of the situation. Soon these children will be born, nourished by the blood of man. The babies are born into this world. The investigation of the murders continues with no evidence found. Kide is the only witness to the true nature of the hospital, the women of the maternity ward denying such events, despite her continuously catching them feasting. As she is relieved from the hospital after recovery, Kide says goodbye to her cousin and newly born son. She takes note that the baby seems to have a rather bloated tummy, but upon mention of this observation, she's met with glares from all the mothers. The doctor assures her all the babies are wearing tummy bands. That's why they currently look bloated. And upon glancing around, this seems to be the case. But it just seems too extreme of a bloating to ignore. She insists to her cousin if she's really sure the boy's okay. And the eyes of the child glare up at Kide. All the babies look to each other. In unison, they shriek at the top of their lungs. Kide runs away in terror, tripping down the steps and once more hospitalizing herself in this accursed place. In the nightly meals, a strange spiral mushroom becomes included in every dish. Kide avoids these fungi, their taste closer to meat than something from this earth. She seems to be the only one bothered by the contents of the meals, others praising this delicious ingredient for how full of energy it makes them feel. Kide walks down the hall to get away from this chatter, only to walk into another conversation from within the newborn ward. The children speak of returning to the wombs they have been forced out of. They talk in excitement. As their enthusiasm rises, so does the placenta from within their clothes. The buttons burst off as they rise to the sky like a mushroom, attached to the children by their umbilical cords. These placentas share the same swirling spirals of the fungi in the hospital room. Kide backpedals away from the window, sick to her stomach when screams are heard from the room over. She rushes over to find that her cousin's child has been the first chosen to return to the womb. Entering the delivery room, Dr. Kawamoto blocks her way. He tells her the babies have spoken to him, told him of their longing for a return to the role of fetus. They wanted not the process of growth towards independence. They merely desire the simplicities and warmth of the womb. The doctor complied to these wishes, influenced by the spiral. Opening the operating room doors reveals the horrors of the surgery. Kirei's cousin has been sewn back together like a used doll. Simple stitching along her belly holds the child in. With the baby's return, she once more craves the blood of humans. The doctor restrains Kirei for her to feast on, but as the tongue-like tendrils escape from her cousin's mouth, forming the shape of a mosquito's probe, it latches onto the doctor's neck, draining him of blood till all that's left is the husk of skin and bones. Kirei runs from the room as two patients stumble upon the jungle of placenta mushrooms. Entranced by the spiral, they feast upon the garden. Kirei's cousin latches onto one of the patients, feasting upon his body. She runs without looking back, sprinting towards the waiting room through the streets as far away from this den of bloodthirsty children and mothers she can get. She never once thinks about returning, never once wonders what happened after she left. She only wishes to forget about what she saw. Kurozo has had unreasonably perfect weather this summer. Not a single storm has passed through, though that's about to change. Shuichi senses the incoming typhoon well before anyone else, running around town in a panic, screaming for people to board their windows and take shelter. They look at him like a lunatic. Thus, yet again, no one heeds the words of the one man who seems to have his head on straight. The one resident who acknowledges the terrifying power of the spiral. The typhoon hits hours later, soaking the city in heavy winds and torrential downpours. As Kirei falls asleep that night, she hears the sound of her name in the wind calling out to her. Looking out her window, it seems the rains have let up, but hanging overhead is the eye of the storm, peering down upon the town from the heavens. Kirei ignores it and the sound of her name she heard last night, but Shuichi does not. As Kirei treks through the rains towards Shuichi's home, they cross paths. He lectures her for stepping outside while the typhoon's eye watches her intently and speaks her name as if longing for her. She's in grave danger if she doesn't find shelter. The wind once more speaks her name as the eye attempts to steal her from the earth and bring her to the sky. As they run, Kirei is pinned by flying debris. A woman comes over to help Shuichi free her, but the storm pulls this woman to the heavens, mistaking her for the one of desire. A few moments pass as she is sucked into the eye, but once it realizes its mistake, it spits her back down to the surface. Fear builds. There's uncertainty if this typhoon will ensnare the town until it gets what it desires. Shuichi pulls Kirei to a manhole, hoping to escape the storm underground. But as they slide down the ladder, the eye peeks in. The waters of the sewer begin to swirl, creating crude spiral patterns. It forms around the pair, launching them into the sky, into the eye of the storm. They're thrashed around within, until like the smoke of the crematorium, the typhoon is pulled into Dragonfly Pond. Kirei and Shuichi are found there, clinging to life. The storm has vanished, though another one is just along the horizon. The damages to Kurozu were strongest around Dragonfly Pond. All houses within several hundred meters were razed to the ground. The pond currently swirls as if in anticipation of a new event about to unfold. The Goshima family is forced to relocate after their home became rubble, but the only available choice was none other than a row house, hundreds of years old and said to be haunted. Mrs. Goshima is heavily against it, as is Mitsuo, who is certain a monster roams the area. But with another typhoon in the way and no other homes available, they have no choice. The row house is divided into 3 apartments. Next to them lives a resident with a similar situation, Wakabayashi. He tells them a group of squatters live in the 3rd apartment, and it's best not to disturb them. Reflecting on the conversation, the man gives off a strange aura, as if slightly incapable of empathy or social cues. It's uncertain how much the spiral has grabbed onto his soul thus far. As Kirei cleans the porch, she gets her first look at the squatter family. An old woman covered from head to toe comes to hang up laundry. Each robe put up brandishes large holes across the cloth. Something hard and calloused like a horn is the only logical conclusion for what created this damage. Seeing her struggle, Kirei tries to help the old woman, but she only tells her to stay away. Wakabayashi tells her she lives alone with her son, who supposedly is deformed beyond recognition. He speaks lowly of the family, almost as if he takes pleasure in their hardship. Kirei retreats from this conversation, a tad disgusted by how the man talks of other human beings. Returning outside that afternoon, hearing the old woman yell in agony. She rushes over to find the woman pointing towards her dead son. Covering her hand are spiraled horns, and her son, well, his body left holes in the floorboard themselves. Kirei doesn't speak of these horrors to anyone, despite her neighbor's insistence to tell him. That night, the Goshima family sits around, complaining about the same swirling warts they all seem to have. It doesn't take long for Kirei to connect the dots as they begin to protrude from their skin like horns. This is the same disease the squatters suffered, the spiral's curse on this row house. It has a crude way of toying with the townfolk's life. As panic sets in for the family, an eye watches from a small hole in the wall, gazing at Kirei intently. Wakabayashi praises her fine skin, her brown hair that pairs nicely with her eyes. He thinks about creating another hole to see more, one closer to her bed, but his disturbed infatuation is interrupted by a strange sensation on his hand. The spiral horns have begun to escape from his body. Yasuo is in great agony as the horns rip through his clothing. It's uncertain whether he will live to see tomorrow. The family looks over their father, uncertain what to do, when horns suddenly begin to grow from the wall. They coil as they protrude through. The wall bulges as more drill into the wood. The family falls silent as the wall finally collapses. Their neighbor has become more beast than human. He grabs a nearby rat and consumes it, blood streaming down his lips. The monster stands up, whispering in a hushed voice the name Kirei. He lunges at her as she flees for the door, crawling outside. The winds of the storm are so strong the rain is practically sideways. The beast stands over her, ready to feast, when a wooden stake flies through the sky, settling into Wakabayashi's neck. His body falls to the ground, immobile. His fate has been sealed. The family leaves the row house after the typhoon. Just like the last storm, it's found its resting place in the Dragonfly Pond. Once outside the house's doors, their bodies return to normal, and the horns disappear. Out of the 3 resident families, they were the lucky ones. Over the past couple weeks, 6 typhoons have hit the village. Disaster relief has been dispatched to the town as well as media coverage. Yet, of those who attempt the trek to Kurozu, a large majority would die before arriving. Tornadoes lay wreck to dozens of cars, and few survivors like Maruyama are lucky enough to make it to the wreckage of the town. That's if you consider the cursed village lucky to begin with. Few buildings remain standing in the village. Those that aren't row houses become targets for a band of orphans who use a strange power to create twisters and blow them over. Maruyama gets targeted by some male violent children who attempt to kill her with this power, only to be saved by Kirei. She tells Maruyama these powerful winds are created by strong movements and noises. This oddity started when Dragonfly Pond consumed 6 typhoons. Drunk on power and likely influence from the spiral, these children who lost their parents in the storm listened to the voice of the spiral telling them to bring ruin. The only safe house is unable to be toppled, the row homes. Kirei and her family had taken shelter in one devoid of the curse of horns, yet it's a gamble whether this house holds a different, more sinister curse. Within the structure, at least a few dozen, if not 100, are gathered, all knowing that these structures are their only sanctuary. No one knows why, that is except for Shuichi. From the corner he rocks himself back and forth, speaking of the town's desire to return to the shape of a spiral, how the spiral is driving people mad, solidified as they all collectively blow wind at the orphan children, sending them into the air. The children begin riding the twisters the wind creates, opening a new door for trouble. The end quickly approaches, as humanity's sanity grows dimmer. More people are recruited to the spiral's cause of demolishing structures. Relief volunteers still flock to the town, unaware that there is no way to leave once you've arrived. Food shortages have become the biggest issue among the population, along with overcrowding in the row houses. As more and more people become on edge, the Goshima family is kicked from their home along with Shuichi, the door shut tightly behind them. There is no hope for a saving grace. Nothing they do will change the fate of this town or their lives. Shuichi has lost his sanity. Yasuo refuses to make any attempt to escape, wanting to create his ceramics in the art of the spiral. Mitsuo only complains about hunger and his desire to join the gang of twister riders. Kirei is left the only one holding on to her sanity, along with Maruyama. As they trek through the ruins, Mitsuo runs up on the gang, seeing that they are cooking meat, hoping to beg for some. But looking into the fire, the menu today includes the flesh of those who have become snails. One of the members cracks open the shell, a melted humanoid face visible in the meat. The gang ravages the body. They look towards Mitsuo, offering him some meat. He's hesitant of joining. They offer the 2 girls some. Kirei is very against eating the snail humans. They insist these things are human no longer, but from the grins on their face and their crazed eyes, it doesn't seem they're human either. Yasuo steps in front of his daughter to protect her, but the gang blows him away. The group attempts to run, but the Twister gang wraps them into their storms. They're blown around, bodies flying through the skies. The Twisters are slowly pulled towards the Dragonfly Pond. Its swirling water is something you can see a mile away. Maruyama and Kirei latch onto one another, holding for dear life as Shuichi grabs Kirei with his right hand and a pole in his left. They're ripped from the Twisters as the entire gang becomes consumed by the pond, ending their reign of chaos. The fate of Kirei's family is uncertain, though at this point, death may just be a better alternative to the continued existence in Kurozu's wreckage. The town continues to fall into more dire straits. Volunteers continue to pour in, the poor souls unaware of their damning fates. People try to escape through the mountain tunnels, but their paths twist and turn, becoming a void with no end. Some attempt to sail, only to be swallowed by the sea itself. Escaping by air is just as futile. The only path yet to be tried is a winding mountain pass. Kirei had reunited with her mother and brother. Her father is still missing to this day. The group is slowly starving, and if nothing changes, they won't last more than a week. Twisters run rampant throughout the ruins, making the area increasingly dangerous as time goes on. But the row houses have become a fortress with closed doors, the people within blowing away anyone who tries to enter. Kirei and Maruyama are united with some volunteers, desperate for somewhere to rest before trying another escape attempt. Their leader, Tanizaki, asks if they could show them a row house. Some of their group have begun the transformation into a snail, and it's rumored their only chance of survival is to enter a row house. There the process of mutation will cease, but these fortresses bear no entry. The townsfolk outside force their way into the doors, launching attacks on the buildings. They splinter the wall with a ram, opening a hole to funnel into, but the reality of the row houses quickly sets in. The people from within bulge out from the cramped space, their bodies a twisted amalgamation of heads, arms, and feet. In anger, they lash out, trying to return to the recesses of the house. The conjoined bodies burst out the sides, using nearby debris to create extensions on the home's walls. Seeing that there's no hope they can enter, the group wanders elsewhere. They bicker over what they should do. Tanizaki thinks they should build an extension on one of the row homes for them to live in. Others wish to find a way to escape. They go back and forth until in the distance a naval fleet is spotted heading their way. This moment of hope is shortly lived. They all watch the cruisers become ensnared by the ocean's mouth, slowly taking each ship to the pits of the sea. They're forced to continue their wandering, setting up camp in the rubble. Low on food, they turn to the snail corpses nearby for sustenance. The volunteers dig in, enjoying the meat like a delicacy, their hunger satisfied by the flavor. Shuichi takes part in the feast as well, and seeing as they have no other hope for survival, Kirei eats part of the snail too. The next day, she, Shuichi, and Maruyama separate from the rest of the group, returning to the makeshift shelter where her brother and mother wait. She finds the place in wreckage, a twister having hit in the middle of the night. She only pulls her brother from the ruins. Their mother had been ripped away by the tornado, but that's the least of their worries. On Mitsuo's back is the beginnings of a snail shell. The spiral intends to take her brother too. She knows the only hope for his survival is to flee the town. The group begins the trek up the mountain. Outlooking the town, they take note how all the row houses face Dragonfly Pond, which sits in the very middle of town. Tanizaki spots them climbing the mountain from atop his renovations on a row house. He calls out, assuring them the construction will be done by the time they return. A quick glance across the plain shows he's not the only one giving up hope of escaping in exchange for a roof overhead. A few miles up the road, they run into the volunteers from earlier. They're just as confused as Kirei's group running into each other. How could they possibly cross paths when they were setting out away from the village as well? Frustrated, they turn around and follow along with Kirei, hoping to escape this poor town. Kirei takes note of the man they have on a leash, asking them what the reason for this is. They simply say he's their emergency food supply, showing her the shell already covering part of his back. When he becomes fully ripe, they intend to feast on his flesh. She sets this disturbing revelation aside for the time being. They continue walking through the spiraled forest. Tree limbs, stumps, the grass itself, even the roads have become one with the Uzumaki. They all wind together, creating dizzying spirals, and he senses a time lost within the darkness of the forest. The man eventually succumbs to the snail curse, transforming completely. The volunteers' mouths water at the sight of their prey. The snail retreats into his shell, but one of the men follow him in. His body slowly contorts deeper into the shell, consuming the snail man's flesh while he still lives. The other two fight to pull him out so they can eat some too. Kide's group takes their leave while they're distracted. The spiral has the trio within its grasp. It's best to maintain distance. Mitsuo's complaining about his back grows more consistent. Kide offers to carry him, and as she puts him on her back, the three men reappear from the shadows. Their faces are manic, their mouths still salivating as if they haven't had a thing to eat in days. They hunger for the meat of another snail human, and they take note of the boy's large bag. Maruyama assures them he's carrying a backpack, but they seem to know all too well this is a lie. They decide to follow the group, knowing it's only a matter of time before the boy is a snail. The men begin to salivate at the thought of eating him. As Mitsuo's transformation begins to complete, they attempt to escape the men, only to end up on the mountainside on the other end of town. It's improbable they walked in circles, but they have no time to question the warping outskirts of the town. Kide pleads with Mitsuo to climb down the cliff edge and escape before the men eat him. He eventually listens, fleeing from sight as they exit the forest. Shuichi acts as if he's still carrying Mitsuo on his back as the men follow him. They begin daydreaming of the meat they'll soon consume, reminiscing of the feeling of climbing into the shell as their prey thrashed around within. Just the thought makes them spiral. Their bodies begin to contort into crude shapes, ligaments performing a strange dance as the bones crack and the flesh extends into the shape of an Uzumaki. They die on the spot as the trio approaches the village outlook point, only to find their time in the forest was much longer than anticipated. The row houses coil around Dragonfly Pond. It's as if they've been gone for years. Descending the mountain, there is only one way inward, through the pattern of the spiral. The trio begins to follow the winding paths inward. The people of the row houses asking them as they walk by to dispose of corpses entangled in a humanoid coil. As they descend deeper, they finally run into a person separated from the row house amalgamation of bodies. The man turns out to be none other than Tanizaki, who was entrusted with the duty of cleaning up the debris and bodies from the spiral path. The town is nearly complete, the few remaining holes being worked on as they speak by the residents within the row homes. He's able to give Kide some good news, that there is a potter and his wife working in the middle of the town, pursuing mastery of the art of the spiral. She can tell it's her father Tanizaki he speaks of, and they descend deeper into the spiral in search of them, only they're stopped by a massive pile of debris blocking their path. With no other hope to make it through, they quickly move through a closing gap in the row house walls. The residents continue their work as they run through, the gap becoming smaller and smaller. Maruyama, the last in line, becomes trapped within its walls as the gap seals and the town homes all become interconnected. The row houses fall silent. Shuichi opens one of the doors, revealing all who were inside have disappeared. They continue towards the middle of town. Through the empty homes, finding Dragonfly Pond has been replaced with stairs which descend into the abyss. The couple looks into the void. With no other options before them, they decide to descend, to find Kide's parents and the source of the Uzumaki. The stairs descend into eternity. Time loses all sense of meaning as they move farther and farther downward. They come across a stray spiral body that must have been separated from the majority. It begs to be taken with them to the wonder of the Uzumaki. They reject his pleas, neither with enough strength to carry him downwards. The thing lashes out in anger, biting Kide's ankle. Shuichi wrestles the man off. It lets go of her foot and lunges at the boy. The pair fall into the void, Shuichi's screams becoming quieter and quieter until his outline disappears into the darkness below. Kide runs downwards in a panic, approaching the end of the stairs. Looking below is a several hundred feet drop into the cavern, whose walls are coated in spiral patterns. A large spiral obelisk is only a few feet below, close enough to jump to. She takes the risk, grabbing onto the surface, but her hand slips, and she falls to the pits below. The grooves of the obelisk break her fall every so often, a gust of wind catching her before her body collides with the cavern floor. She opens her eyes to take in the world around her, when the truth of the Uzumaki is revealed to us. As far as the eye can see, strange divine structures stand captivating the deranged residents that make up the floor of these caverns. Like a god, these spirals leave the townsfolk mesmerized. in some sort of state of euphoria. Kirei can feel the pull of the spiral, the will of the Uzumaki. It's as if the celestial being is calling to her to join them in union, to become one with the shape of order and chaos, of divinity and sin. She fights it, searching the spiral citadel for Shuichi. She first spots her parents, their corpses made up of crude clay, cracking on the edges. It's quite obvious there's nothing she can do for them, or frankly anyone for that matter. Shuichi calls her name from a few feet away. He tells her he can no longer go on. The spiral calls to him, and he no longer has the will to fight it. Kirei feels the same, and so the lovers embrace, as their bodies intertwine to the will of the spiral. With the curse having run its course, it can complete its divine will. The obelisk seals the cavern's entrance, locking in place to complete the true form of Kurozu. Kirei speaks of this moment in time as an eternal, never-ending existence. Just as time quickened in the outskirts of town, here in the center, it stood still. This moment would last seemingly for eternity, till the next Kurozu is built upon the spiral's ruins, setting into motion the next awakening of the divine celestial being, the Uzumaki, who will once more turn a small port town into the eternal spiral. Like the winding pattern of its shape, its presence and its purpose is never ending. Staring into its shape, we can feel the allure, the uncertainty, the chaos and the order that eternity houses. After all, eternity is the true nature of time, for time will never truly end, and like the Uzumaki, it will forever remain.